The acrid smell of burning paper still clings to my clothes as I write this, 3 hours after watching my inheritance check, $847,000 from my late grandmother's estate, curl into ash in my stepfather's backyard fire pit. My mother held the lighter. My half-sister recorded it on her phone. And my stepbrother Marcus just smiled that cold, calculating smile I'd learned to fear over the past 15 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. You don't deserve this money, Zara, Mom had said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. You abandoned this family. You chose your career over us. Grandma Rose would be rolling in her grave if she knew what you've become. What? I've become? As if dedicating my life to pediatric surgery, saving children's lives, working 80-hour weeks at one of the country's most prestigious hospitals was something shameful. As if the choice to remain childless and unmarried at 32 was a moral failing that voided my right to my grandmother's final gift. But here's what they didn't know, what none of them suspected as they stood around that fire pit like some twisted ritual circle, watching nearly $1 million disappear into smoke. That check wasn't my inheritance. It was my down payment. My name is Dr. Zara Elena Vasquez, and this is the story of how my family's betrayal became the catalyst for the most extraordinary chapter of my life. How their cruelty revealed truths that changed everything. And how sometimes, losing what you think you want most leads you to discover what you actually need. I should start at the beginning, or at least where this particular nightmare began, 3 weeks ago, standing in the law offices of Pemberton, Klein and Associates, listening to Mr. Pemberton read my grandmother's will to a room full of relatives who had barely visited her in the nursing home but suddenly appeared when money was mentioned. Grandma Rose had been my anchor. The only person in my fractured family who understood my drive, who celebrated my achievements instead of resenting them. When other relatives whispered about my cold heart and selfish ambitions, Rose would take my hands in her weathered ones and say, Mija, you have the gift of healing. Never let anyone make you smaller for being extraordinary. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She'd immigrated from Guatemala at 19 with nothing but determination and a few dollars sewn into her dress. By the time she passed at 91, she owned 3 restaurants, 2 apartment buildings, and had put 6 grandchildren through college, including me through medical school. Rose Martinezjan was a force of nature who never forgot where she came from but refused to let that define where she was going. The will reading was exactly what I'd expected, mostly small bequests to various grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The restaurants going to my Uncle Miguel, who'd worked alongside Rose for 30 years. One of the apartment buildings to my cousin Sophia, who'd been managing the properties. Then came the surprise that changed everything. To my granddaughter, Dr. Zara Elena Vasquez, Mr. Pemberton had read in his careful legal voice, who carries my spirit of determination and my commitment to serving others, I leave the sum of $847,000, to be used for the establishment of the Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic, serving underprivileged children in our community. Additionally, I leave her my personal collection of jewelry and my mother's wedding dress, with the hope that someday she will understand that love comes in many forms, and that healing hearts is as important as healing bodies. The room had erupted. Not in celebration, but in outrage. $800,000. My stepbrother Marcus had stood up, his face flushed red. For some clinic? What about the rest of us? What about family? Zara doesn't even visit, my half-sister Jenny had added, her voice shrill. She's been too busy playing doctor to care about any of us. Why should she get the biggest inheritance? Mom, who hadn't been Rose's daughter but had married into the family when I was 17, had sat in stunned silence. But I could see the calculations happening behind her eyes, the same look she got when she was figuring out how to redirect any good news in my life to benefit her biological children instead. Uncle Miguel had tried to restore order. Rose made her choices for her reasons. She believed in what Zara was doing. But the damage was done. The seed of resentment had been planted, and I knew from 15 years of being the outsider in my own family that it would grow into something ugly. What nobody in that room understood, what I barely understood myself at the time, was that Grandma Rose hadn't just left me money. She'd left me a mission. A chance to create something that would honor both our legacies while serving the community that had shaped us both. The check arrived 2 weeks later, along with Rose's jewelry box and the wedding dress that smelled faintly of her lavender perfume. I held both the financial instrument and the delicate lace with equal reverence, understanding that they represented different aspects of the same gift, the means to honor the past while building something new. I'd already started making plans. The clinic would be located in the old neighborhood where Rose had first settled, where families still struggled with the same barriers to healthcare that she'd faced as a young immigrant mother. I'd researched the permits, identified potential partners, even found the perfect building, a former community center that could be converted into a state-of-the-art pediatric facility. The check was going to the bank the next morning. I'd planned to call Mr. Pemberton afterward to begin the official process of establishing the Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic. Everything was ready, but first, I'd made the mistake of visiting my family. It was supposed to be a simple dinner. Mom had insisted, saying it had been too long since we'd all been together, that Rose's death had reminded everyone how precious family time was. The guilt trip was expertly delivered, as always, and despite my better judgment, I'd agreed. I should have known it was a trap when I arrived at the house in suburbia where Mom lived with my stepfather Harold and found not just immediate family, but cousins, aunts, uncles, basically everyone who'd been at the will reading except Uncle Miguel and Sophia, who'd tried to warn me not to go. "We need to talk," Marcus had said before I'd even put down my purse. "About the money." "There's nothing to discuss," I'd replied, already sensing the setup. Grandma Rose's wishes were clear. Were they? Jenny had emerged from the kitchen, holding a folder of papers. "Because we've been thinking, and it doesn't seem right that you get so much when the rest of us get so little. Maybe," Mom had added in her deceptively gentle voice, "we should find a way to distribute the inheritance more fairly. You know, share it among all the grandchildren." The ambush had been carefully planned. They'd prepared arguments about Rose's real intentions, about family loyalty, about how I owed them something after years of focusing on my career. They'd calculated how much each person would receive if the $847,000 was divided equally among the 15 grandchildren and great-grandchildren, about $56,000 each. They'd made charts. When reason failed, they'd moved to emotional manipulation. Jenny crying about her student loans. Marcus talking about his kids' college funds. Mom lamenting about Harold's medical bills and their mortgage struggles. A symphony of need performed for an audience of one. When that failed, they'd moved to accusations. I was selfish, cold, obsessed with work because I was afraid of real relationships. Rose had been manipulated by my act of caring about her. The clinic was just a tax write-off, a way to make myself look good while hoarding wealth I didn't deserve. And finally, when I'd remained unmoved by their performance, they'd moved to threats. "If you walk out that door with that check," Marcus had said, his voice low and dangerous, "you're no longer family. You're choosing money over us." "I'm choosing to honor Rose's wishes," I'd replied, standing to leave. "If you can't respect that, then maybe we were never really family to begin with." That's when things had gotten physical. Harold, my stepfather, a man I'd barely tolerated for 15 years, had blocked my path to the door. "Nobody's leaving until this gets resolved," he'd said, trying to sound authoritative but mostly sounding drunk. I'd pushed past him, and he'd grabbed my purse. The struggle was brief but intense. Jenny had helped him, screaming about how I thought I was better than everyone else. Marcus had tried to wrestle the check from my hands while Mom stood there, still playing the role of peacemaker even as her family attacked me. "Stop it!" I'd shouted, pulling free with my purse intact. "This is insane. It's just money." "Exactly," Marcus had panted, straightening his shirt. "It's just money. So why can't you share it?" That's when I'd made my final mistake. In my anger, my frustration, my desperate need to make them understand, I'd told them about the clinic plans. About how the money wasn't just inheritance, it was seed funding for something that could change lives, could honor Rose's legacy in a meaningful way. A free clinic. Jenny had laughed, but it was a harsh, bitter sound. "You mean you're going to give away our inheritance to strangers instead of family?" "It's not our inheritance," I'd said. "It's mine. And it's what Rose wanted." But even as I'd said it, I could see I'd made a tactical error. By revealing my plans, I'd given them a new angle of attack. Well then, Mom had said quietly, I guess we need to stop you from making a terrible mistake. They'd surrounded me again. But this time it wasn't about wrestling away the check. This time, Marcus had his phone out, calling someone. Yeah, it's me, he'd said into the device. She's here. Yeah, she has it. Okay, we'll wait. 20 minutes later, my half-uncle Richard had arrived. Richard was Harold's brother, a man who'd made his living in various gray-area financial schemes and had always resented my success. He'd brought with him a stack of legal documents and a confident smile that made my stomach clench. Now, Zara, he'd said, settling into Mom's living room like he owned it, I think there might be some irregularities with your grandmother's will. Some questions about her mental competency in her final years. The threat was clear. Challenge the will. Tie up the inheritance in legal battles that could last for years. Destroy the clinic plan through bureaucratic warfare. You can't be serious, I'd said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were completely serious. Rose was 91, Richard had continued, shuffling through his papers. She'd been in the nursing home for 2 years. There are documented incidents of confusion, memory loss. A good lawyer could argue she wasn't of sound mind when she made that will. She was sharp as a tack until the day she died, I'd protested. Says you, Marcus had added. But the rest of the family has concerns. We think maybe you influenced her. Took advantage of an elderly woman's confusion. The room had gone silent except for the sound of my heart pounding. They were threatening to destroy Rose's reputation, to paint her as a senile old woman manipulated by her ambitious granddaughter, all to get their hands on money they felt entitled to. What do you want? I'd asked, though I already knew. Simple, Richard had smiled. Sign the check over to your mother. She'll distribute it fairly among all the grandchildren. Everyone gets their share, and we don't have to drag Rose's memory through the courts. And if I refuse? Then we file the competency challenge tomorrow morning. The check gets frozen pending investigation. Could take years to resolve, and legal fees will eat up most of the money anyway. Nobody wins. I'd looked around the room at these people I'd grown up calling family. Mom, who'd never once defended me against her biological children's treatment. Jenny, who'd bullied me throughout high school and then expected financial help with her wedding. Marcus, who'd borrowed money from me 3 times and never paid back a cent. Harold, who'd made it clear from day one that I was an unwelcome reminder of his wife's previous life, and I'd realized that Rose had been right about something else. She'd told me years ago, sometimes, Mija, you have to lose your family to find your true self. Fine, I'd said, pulling the check from my purse. You want it? Take it. I'd endorsed the check over to my mother, watching her face light up with relief and greed. She'd immediately handed it to Marcus, who'd pulled out his phone to calculate everyone's share, but then Mom had paused, looking at the check more carefully. Wait, she'd said. This is made out to the Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic. You can't just endorse this over to me. They'd all stared at the check, finally understanding what I'd tried to explain. Rose hadn't left me personal money. She'd left me a trust fund for a specific purpose, with me as the designated administrator. The silence stretched for long minutes as the implications sank in. Finally, Marcus had spoken. So you're the only one who can cash this? That's right, I'd said. And you refuse to share it with family? I refuse to betray Rose's wishes. That's when Mom had walked to the kitchen drawer and pulled out a lighter. Then maybe, she'd said, her voice calm and cold, nobody should get it. I'd watched in shock as my own mother had carried the check outside to Harold's fire pit. The rest of the family had followed like a procession, gathering around as she'd lit the kindling. Last chance, Zara, she'd said, holding the lighter inches from the check. Choose family or choose your pride. I'd stood there, understanding that this moment would define the rest of my relationship with these people. That whatever I chose, there would be no going back. I choose Rose, I'd said quietly. Mom had touched the flame to the corner of the check. As I watched $847,000 turn to ash, as I listened to Jenny laugh and record the whole thing on her phone, as I saw the satisfied smile on Marcus's face, I felt something break inside me. But it wasn't my heart. It was the last chain connecting me to people who had never truly been my family. There, Mom had said, brushing ash from her hands. Now nobody gets to be better than anyone else. You're right, I'd replied, surprising them all. Now I know exactly who you really are. I'd walked away then, leaving them standing around their fire pit like the arsonists they'd become. I'd driven straight home to my apartment, poured a large glass of wine, and sat down to figure out what came next, because here's what my family didn't know, what they couldn't have known in their small-minded, zero-sum understanding of the world, that check wasn't my only resource. It wasn't even my primary resource. Rose had taught me something more valuable than money: how to build something from nothing. How to turn determination into opportunity. How to make the impossible happen through sheer force of will and strategic thinking. The Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic was going to exist. Not because of the inheritance, but in spite of its destruction. And when it opened its doors to serve the children who needed it most, when it began saving lives and honoring Rosa's true legacy, my family would understand exactly what they'd really burned that night. They'd destroyed a check, but they'd also revealed their true nature. And in doing so, they'd set me free to become everything Rose had always believed I could be. The real story, the one that would matter in the end, was just beginning. The morning after watching my inheritance burn, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. While my family probably expected me to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness and acceptance, I was already 3 steps ahead of their small-minded game. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and began making calls. "Dr. Morrison?" I said when the hospital's chief of staff answered. "It's Zara Vasquez. I need to discuss something with you about my research sabbatical application." What my family didn't know, what they couldn't have known because they'd never bothered to really listen when I talked about my work, was that I'd been planning to take a year-long sabbatical to focus on pediatric surgical techniques in underserved communities. The hospital had already approved it. The timing was perfect. More importantly, they didn't know about the medical innovation I'd been developing. For the past 3 years, I'd been working on a revolutionary surgical technique for treating congenital heart defects in infants. The procedure, which I'd named the Vasqueztian method in honor of both my heritage and Rosa's maiden name, had shown unprecedented success rates in my preliminary trials. I'd been documenting everything meticulously, preparing for publication and patent applications. What started as academic research had evolved into something much more significant: a medical breakthrough that could save thousands of children's lives while generating substantial licensing revenue. The phone calls continued throughout the morning. "Patricia?" I reached my patent attorney. "I need to accelerate the application process for the Vasqueztian method. And I want to discuss licensing strategies." Dr. Martinez speaking. My contact at the medical device company that had been following my research. "I understand there might be an opportunity to discuss exclusive licensing arrangements. This is Zara Vasquez. I'm ready to move forward with the documentary project about immigrant women in medicine." Each conversation built momentum. By noon, I had meetings scheduled with patent lawyers, medical device manufacturers, documentary producers, and pharmaceutical companies. The foundation for my new life was taking shape, built not on inheritance money but on intellectual property, professional relationships, and strategic partnerships I'd been cultivating for years. My phone rang as I was reviewing licensing contracts. "Uncle Miguel." Mija, his familiar voice carried warmth and concern. "Sophia told me what happened last night. Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay," I said, surprising us both with how much I meant it. "I'm free. Your mother called me this morning. She's worried you might do something rash." I laughed, actually laughed. "Like what? Build a successful medical practice? Honor Rosa's legacy? Create something meaningful? She thinks you might try to contest the will, claim they interfered with your inheritance." "Miguel," I said gently, "there's nothing to contest. They burned a check, not my future. Rose left me something far more valuable than money." "What's that?" "Her example. Her belief in me. Her understanding that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out who you really are." We talked for another 20 minutes. Miguel filled me in on the family aftermath, Jenny posting the video of the check burning on social media, Marcus already fighting with the others about how to split money they'd never actually obtained, Mom crying and claiming she'd been protecting me from my own pride. "They're all waiting for you to apologize," Miguel said. "They'll be waiting a long time." That afternoon, I drove to Rosa's old neighborhood, the same streets where she'd raised 5 children while building her restaurant empire. The community center I'd identified for the clinic sat empty, a "for sale" sign weathered by months of Sun and rained out. I parked across the street and made another call. Mr. Pemberton? It's Dr. Vasquez. I need to ask you something about my grandmother's will. Of course, doctor. I heard about the unfortunate incident with the check. I'm so sorry. Actually, I'm calling about something else. The jewelry and wedding dress Rose left me, have they been appraised for estate purposes? Papers rustled on his end. Yes, we had them evaluated by Rodriguez Fine Jewelry for insurance purposes. The total value came to, let me see, $127,000. Quite a collection. Your grandmother had exquisite taste in diamonds. I smiled, looking at the community center that would soon house the Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic. Mr. Pemberton, I'd like to discuss liquidating those assets for a specific purpose. The clinic? The clinic. Within a week, the jewelry had been sold to collectors who appreciated both its beauty and its history. Rose's wedding dress went to a museum of immigration history, where it would be displayed alongside stories of remarkable women who'd built new lives in America. The $127,000, combined with my own savings and a small business loan, was enough to secure the community center, but the real breakthrough came 2 weeks later. Dr. Vasquez, the voice on the phone belonged to Dr. Sarah Chen, Chief of Pediatric Surgery at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I've been following your research on the Vasquez-Chen method. We'd like to discuss a partnership. The conversation that followed changed everything. Not only did CHOP want to license my surgical technique, they wanted to establish a research partnership that would provide funding, equipment, and medical residence for a community clinic. They saw the Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic as the perfect testing ground for innovative pediatric care delivery models. We're prepared to offer a licensing deal worth $1.2 million over 3 years, Dr. Chen explained, plus full equipment, donations and staffing support for your clinic. I sat in Rose's rocking chair, the one piece of furniture I'd claimed from her apartment, and felt her presence so strongly it took my breath away. She'd always said that when you do the right thing for the right reasons, the universe conspires to help you succeed. The licensing deal was signed on a Tuesday. The clinic construction began on a Thursday. By the following month, I was featured on the cover of Medical Innovation Quarterly as the surgeon who's revolutionizing pediatric heart care. The article mentioned my family exactly once, Dr. Vasquez credits her late grandmother, Rosa Martinez-Chen, as her inspiration for combining medical excellence with community service. It didn't mention the inheritance. It didn't mention the burning check. It didn't mention the family that had tried to destroy my dream out of jealousy and greed, because by then, those things were footnotes in a much larger story. The Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic opened 8 months after that night around the fire pit. The grand opening was attended by the mayor, 3 city council members, representatives from 5 major hospitals, and dozens of families from the neighborhood who would benefit from our services. Uncle Miguel was there, beaming with pride. Sophia brought her children, who marveled at the state-of-the-art equipment. My mentor from medical school flew in from Boston. Colleagues I'd worked with over the years came to show support. My mother, Marcus, Jenny, and Harold were notably absent, but they were watching. I knew because Sophia told me later that Jenny had been stalking my social media, screenshotting news articles about the clinic and sharing them in family group chats with bitter comments about how I was showing off and trying to make them look bad. The irony was perfect. They thought burning my inheritance would humble me, would force me to come back and beg for their acceptance. Instead, it had freed me to build something far more valuable than they'd destroyed. The clinic's first patient was a 7-year-old girl named Isabella, born with the same type of heart defect that my new surgical technique was designed to treat. Her parents had been turned away from 2 other hospitals because they couldn't afford the procedure. Is it true, her mother asked me in Spanish, tears streaming down her face, that this won't cost us anything? It's true, I replied, also in Spanish. My grandmother believed that healing should be available to everyone, regardless of their ability to pay. The surgery was successful. Isabella made a full recovery. 6 months later, she sent me a drawing of herself playing soccer with the words, "Gracias, Doctora Zara," written in purple crayon. That drawing sits framed in my office now, next to a photo of Rose and me taken during my medical school graduation. It reminds me daily that some gifts can't be burned, some legacies can't be destroyed by small people with small minds. The real vindication came a year later, at the annual Martinez family reunion, the first one I'd attended since the night of the burning. I hadn't planned to go. I'd moved on, built my new life, and generally avoided family gatherings. But Sophia had insisted, saying there were things I needed to see, people I needed to meet. I arrived late, when the gathering was in full swing. The moment I walked into Uncle Miguel's backyard, conversation stopped. People turned to stare. I could feel the mix of curiosity, resentment, and grudging respect. Marcus approached first, looking older and more tired than I remembered. "Zara," he said awkwardly. We heard about the clinic. Pretty impressive. Thank you. I also heard about the money, the licensing deals and everything. You're doing pretty well for yourself. I studied his face, looking for traces of the man who'd stood around that fire pit, watching my inheritance burn with satisfaction. All I saw was someone who'd realized, too late, that he'd made a terrible miscalculation. "I'm doing exactly what Rose always knew I could do," I replied. Jenny appeared at his shoulder, phone in hand as always, but she seemed uncertain for once. "Mom wants to talk to you," she said quietly. I found my mother sitting alone at a picnic table, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered. When she saw me approaching, she stood up quickly, nervously smoothing her dress. "Zara," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You came." Sophia insisted. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment before she spoke again. "I need to apologize," she said. "What we did that night, it was wrong. We were angry and scared and we acted terribly." I waited, letting her continue. "When I heard about the clinic, about your success, about everything you've accomplished." She trailed off, tears starting to form. "I realized what Rose saw in you. What she always saw." "And what was that?" "That you were never going to be small enough for the rest of us to control. That you were always going to do extraordinary things, whether we supported you or not." The apology felt genuine, but it also felt incomplete. There was something else in her expression, something that looked like hope mixed with calculation. "Marcus lost his job 3 months ago," she continued. "Jenny's getting divorced, and Harold's medical bills are getting worse. We could really use—" "No," I said quietly but firmly. Her face fell. "Zara, please. We're family. We made a mistake." "But you didn't make a mistake," I interrupted. "You made a choice. You chose to try to destroy something beautiful rather than celebrate it. You chose greed over generosity, control over love. But we're sorry." "I believe you are. But being sorry doesn't undo the damage. And it doesn't entitle you to anything from me now." I turned to walk away, then paused and looked back. Rose left me everything I needed to build something meaningful, I said. Including the lesson that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who'll hurt you the worst when they don't get what they want from you. As I walked away, I heard her calling my name, but I didn't turn back. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. Near the edge of Miguel's property, I found Sophia sitting with her teenage daughter, both of them looking at something on a tablet. "What are you watching?" I asked, settling beside them. "The documentary. About you," Sophia's daughter said excitedly. "The one about women doctors from immigrant families. Mom says you're famous now." I laughed. "I'm not famous. I'm just doing work that matters." "Same thing," Sophia said, smiling. "Rose would be so proud." We watched the documentary together as the sun set over the reunion. It told the story of 5 women who'd overcome various obstacles to become doctors, with my story serving as the conclusion. The filmmakers had focused on the clinic, the surgical innovation, and the community impact, painting a picture of someone who'd turned personal challenge into public service. They'd interviewed me extensively about Rose's influence on my life and career. In the final scene, I'm standing in the clinic's main treatment room, holding Isabella's drawing. "My grandmother taught me that the most valuable inheritance isn't money," my filmed self says. "It's the belief that you can create something meaningful from whatever circumstances you're given." She left me much more than a check. She left me the understanding that sometimes you have to lose everything to find out what you're really capable of. As the credits rolled, Sophia squeezed my hand. "You know what the best part is," she said. "What's that?" "They thought burning that check would teach you a lesson about family loyalty. Instead, they taught you a lesson about your own strength." She was right. The night my family burned my inheritance, they thought they were punishing me for choosing my dreams over their demands. What they actually did was set me free to become the person Rose always believed I could be. The Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic now serves over 300 families a year. The Vasquezcan method has been adopted by hospitals in 12 countries. I've been invited to speak at medical conferences around the world about innovative community healthcare delivery. Isabella, the little girl who was our first patient, is now a healthy 9-year-old who wants to be a doctor when she grows up. Her parents bring me pictures of her soccer games and honor roll certificates. I never got another inheritance check. I never needed one. Because Rose left me something far more valuable than money. She left me the knowledge that I was capable of building extraordinary things from whatever materials I had available, whether that was surgical skill, business acumen, community connections, or simply the determination to prove that love and vision could overcome greed and small-mindedness. My family burned $847,000 that night. In return, I built something worth millions, both in monetary value and human impact. Sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming so successful, so fulfilled, so genuinely happy that the people who tried to destroy you become irrelevant to your story. That's exactly what happened to me, and Rose, wherever she is definitely proud. The end epilogue. 5 years later, Dr. Zara Elena Vasquez was named one of Time magazine's 100 most influential people for her work in pediatric surgery and community healthcare. The Rosa Martinez Memorial Free Clinic has expanded to 3 locations and inspired similar programs in 20 cities. Marcus works part-time at a hardware store and tells people his sister is that famous doctor. Jenny shares news articles about Zara's achievements on social media, claiming family pride she never showed when it mattered. Their mother still sends birthday cards that go unanswered. Uncle Miguel serves on the clinic's board of directors. Sophia manages the clinic's community outreach programs. Isabella is now in high school, maintaining a 4.0 GPA and volunteering at the clinic where she was once a patient. Rosa's rocking chair sits in Zara's home office, a reminder that the most valuable legacies are the ones that inspire others to become their best selves. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.